This episode of the podcast is brought to you by our friends at Regrow, the premier cloud-based cannabis supply chain management system.
If you're a cannabis company searching for a strategic business partner to help you automate your business, scale effectively, and make the supply chain work for you, then you need to know about Regrow. Regrow is the first of its kind software that leverages components of leading ERP and supply chain systems with the necessary compliance of the cannabis industry. Think of Regrow as your single pane of glass view into the entire supply chain. It's available globally with native localization and foreign language support. So if you have a vertically integrated and or multi-state operation, Regrow will help you increase your revenue while keeping your entire operation fully compliant. Visit their website at regrow.io. That's regrow.io. Regrow, the premier cloud-based cannabis supply chain management system. Hello, my fellow people of the plant. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Cannabinoid Connect podcast, your favorite podcast that includes industry-facing conversations with the industry's leading experts that aim to educate and inform the public regarding the plant's endless benefits. My guest today is Patrick Ray. He's the managing director at Poseidon Garden Fund. Patrick Ray, how are you doing, man?
I'm great. Glad to be here.
Hey, thanks so much for agreeing to come on. I gotta say, first and foremost, shout out to the Twitter community around or the Twitter cannabis community, excuse me, for really kind of making this happen. For those listening, I tweeted the other day, just need guest recommendations. Who should I be talking to? And Patrick Ray was tagged several times in that tweet saying, "You got to talk to this guy. You got to talk to this guy." So, Patrick, we made it happen, man. Thanks for coming on.
Glad to be here. It's fun to see this happen that way. I've been following you for a while on Twitter, enjoying your perspectives and your engagement in the industry. I'm glad you reached out.
Well, thank you. Yeah, just trying to do my part like everyone else and just advocating for this plan and trying to push it forward, And I'm excited because this is Poseidon's second time coming on the podcast. I had Emily Paxia on previously, who is absolutely wonderful. Big fan of Emily. So yeah, good to have you on. And so why don't we start, Patrick? I know that after reading your background, you've spent 15 years in the natural products industry. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that experience, and then when you transitioned into cannabis, which you've been operating in for the past 8 years?
Yeah, sure. No, I was very fortunate to start my professional career in the natural products industry in the mid-late 90s. And that was natural products industry, it encompasses pretty much everything you buy at a Whole Foods, dietary supplements, personal care products, natural organic foods. Back in the 90s, Whole Foods had just gone public. There had been a regulation that was passed in 1994, which guided and sort of put regulations around how you could market and sell dietary supplements, like what health claims you could make. So that was, and then they passed the National Organic Program. So we saw a couple of like legalization and regulatory events, which acted to jumpstart those markets. Unfortunately, I was right there in the middle of it. First as an investment banker, an analyst, probably the worst financial analyst in the history of, but it was a startup investment bank. So it was like 4 newly minted MBAs and myself, and that was great experience. Demystified the process of starting a business and being a manager or being an owner. I moved on to one of our portfolio companies to help get it ready to be sold. The company was based in San Diego. That was my 20s.
Wow.
Why would I return to the East Coast?
Right, exactly.
Surfed every day and worked my tail off. It was great. Enjoyed it. And then, we did sell that company. It worked out for everybody really well. And then when I was sort of looking for a change, the company that acquired that business in San Diego moved me out to Boulder, Colorado, where I live now. And I sort of lived and worked in a large B2B media company. We produced a big trade show called Natural Products Expo West. It's kind of like the MJ Biz of the natural products industry, or maybe MJ Biz is more like the Natural Products Expo West of cannabis. Had incredible experiences. I was young, managing a big team. It was probably a little too much too soon, but it was a definitely trial by fire. And around 2013, I was sort of again feeling like I wanted to do something different. Wanted to get back on the investing side, start something, uh, itch that entrepreneurial or scratch that entrepreneurial itch, which I think a lot of people have.
Mm-hmm.
And things aligned. I went for it, and I launched Canopy Boulder, business accelerator in the cannabis industry. That was sort of the first foray into the space. And
Wow. An accelerator for cannabis, man. That seems like something that is so needed. I mean, not just now, but especially back then in 2013 when the industry was still even more infant than it is now, right? And
yeah,
so, and then not to mention your background, 15 years in natural products overall, like understanding the regulatory framework and how things should be labeled, claims you can and cannot make. So it seems like the transition in 2013, like you knew that world before and you just had to
mhm.
apply it to cannabis, hemp, whatever space you were playing in.
Yeah. I mean, these are the cannabis and hemp spaces. They are driven by a group of super passionate entrepreneurs and professionals that don't leave. It's a lifestyle. They don't leave it at the office, right? These products are preferred alternatives to the market standard products out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Depending on who you talk to and when, they're either under-regulated or over-regulated.
Right.
And that shifts over time. But I think the one thing that one of the main things I take from my experience in the natural products industry which was a very highly entrepreneurial, fast-growing consumer products goods market, disrupting the mainstream, was that the people that were successful over time were those that sort of flexed and bent and navigated the new developments over time, partnering with new people, evolving their product offerings, their knowledge intelligence base, whatever they were doing to be relevant with the right idea at the right time. And those people are sort of legends in the space in natural products. These are the people that made it to sell out to the major CPG companies or to take their company public. And they didn't do it by themselves. They partnered up with really, really smart people that they met in their journey. And that takes me to where I am now with Poseidon Asset Management. I guess what brought me here today.
Right. And in your experience in natural products, would you say that there's any product that has had the same type of trajectory that say like, CBD products are currently going through where, people are wanting the FDA to
Mm.
basically, look at CBD products as a dietary supplement. So can you kind of correlate any other product that's similar to what we're experiencing today with hemp or even cannabis products?
Well, I mean, so the thing to understand about the dietary supplement market, and when in 1994, there was a Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act in 1994, and Congress passed that. The FDA was not happy because they felt that these dietary supplement products, they need to be tested, they need to be proven. The FDA is very much an evidence-based, empirical evidence-based organization. They're designed to protect consumers' health and
Mm-hmm.
wellness. Just to say, hey, all these products are okay didn't sit well with them. So they
Sure.
actually, in many ways, they sat on their hands and did the minimum to create regulations around dietary supplements. So, that may sound and feel familiar to what we're dealing with today, right? With CBD and hemp. So it's not surprising to me.
Okay.
What is surprising to me is that people are so up in arms about it. When they should really just be putting their heads down and continuing to grind out what they need to, understanding what the landscape is right now.
Right.
I think there was a lot of investor hype, maybe more so than in the dietary supplement space in the mid 90s, which brought in a lot of investment and sort of minted these successful companies before they even were really companies, right? And those were overcapitalized, over leveraged, and a lot of them didn't make it.
Mhm.
So you're seeing sort of the companies that in the CBD and hemp space that didn't get caught up in that big raises and lots of debt. They're sort of growing, doing well. So
Right. They just
different
stuck.
strategies.
Yeah, they just stuck to, like you said, they kept their focus and just stuck to the business objectives at hand and kind of just grew naturally. And of
Mhm.
course, doing the right thing, right? Like you mentioned earlier, there's over regulation and under regulation in a lot of different areas in the hemp and cannabis space. And if you can
Mhm.
be an operator that's doing the right thing early on, when we know that these regulations are going to, it's inevitable, right? I mean, at some
Yeah.
point. So they're just basically setting themselves up for future success that way.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to kind of meet the market where it is, right?
Mhm.
And understand what's required and what's needed in the sort of emerging space that you're in. And again, be flexible, pivot, shift, spend here, don't spend there, try it this way, don't try it. It's a great space to be an entrepreneur. It
Mhm.
ain't easy, but if it was easy, everybody'd be doing it, right? So
Absolutely. That's right. That's right. And you touched on the cannabis public markets. I definitely want to dive into that. Before we do, I want to talk to you about your experience founding Canopy Boulder, that
mm,
accelerator you mentioned. And tell us like a little bit about like your experience 2013. What were some of the pain points and challenges that these cannabis entrepreneurs were facing, and how did you help them navigate through those?
well, there were too many to list. Too many challenges. I mean, back in 2013, 14, there was no public market. I mean, there were so many people didn't believe you could patent anything in the cannabis industry. People didn't believe you could have a publicly traded company, right? There were people believe that there was no way to own businesses that touch the plant in multiple states and navigate that. All these things that were proven wrong. And I think that's a lesson for everyone,
Mhm.
that what you believe today about what you can and can't do in the cannabis industry may not be what is proven out tomorrow. So you've got to remain intellectually curious and flexible, and challenge all of these assertions that sometimes people smarter than you and me uh, state. They could be totally wrong. So it was very different. There were a lot of crappy companies trying to raise money. There were like financial schemes, trying to masquerade as companies when they were just, get rich, money raising, leave you in the dust type schemes.
Right.
There was no sort of infrastructure. There was no, like, if you could get a product to a dispensary and regularly so they didn't run out of inventory, you could be a business,
Wow.
right? There was no sales agents, there's no brokers, no distributors. It was very frontier.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's like the wild, 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 wild west. That
it was touch and go. Yeah, I think one of the first meetings I went to, I walked into this guy's office and there was like a bulletproof vest and a gun, like a Glock in a harness hanging on the coat rack. And I'm like, what's going on here?
What the
This is
hell is this?
crazy.
And
Yeah.
before that, like, had you had experience with the plant? Like, did you consume, or was this kind of strictly as an entrepreneur? Like, this is a new market that's burgeoning. I have experience in the natural products market.
Hmm.
It's a great
Hmm.
fit. Like,
Hmm.
where were you coming from?
Yeah, as we spoke before we started recording, I was a very focused athlete, type A. I played soccer my whole life, got me into college, went to Brown. We played in the NCAA tournament. It was very much focused on this. There was certainly some,
Sure.
recreational use in college, and I loved it, enjoyed it immensely.
Right.
But after I graduated, just stayed focused on my career and enjoying myself, surfing, being active, and working really hard.
Hmm.
Um, but I started to have problems with my own wellness. I was getting colds that would turn into chest colds, and have to get antibiotics, and started, it was like every six weeks, 8 weeks, I was
Wow.
getting sick. And what I was doing, I was just running myself down. I was doing too much, burning the candles on both ends and not being as healthy as I should be. Um, what I found was that I just wasn't sleeping enough. And, I was out, I discovered this. Docs wanted to give me sleeping pills and things like that, and didn't feel that great about it. One of my buddies who I rode bikes with said, what you need is an indica. And I was like, what's an indica? I mean, I was that ignorant. So that started me down a path of sort of treating my condition with cannabis, making sure I got incredible sleep and indicas. I'm still an indica guy. And that, I knock on wood, I've had incredible, health and haven't, barely ever get sick. So it's worked
That's
out.
great. That's great. Yeah, indica will definitely get you tired and make you have a good night's rest. So
Yeah.
glad that you found that natural remedy. So let's dive into it, Patrick. So you're the managing director at Poseidon, and why don't you give us just kind of an overview of the current state of the cannabis public markets from your perspective, and then we'll go from there.
Well, so much has changed since we began. And I began on this journey, and I'm one of a number of managing directors at Poseidon. We have an incredible team of 6, and soon expanding. That's now we're managing over $200 million. It is a lot has changed. And the first event I went to in Seattle, it was actually an MJ BizCon event. It was at a dog track outside of Seattle. I went in, I didn't even have a badge. I just walked in. There was, it was so different than it is now. I half expected it to get raided. Crazy pitches, smart people, pioneers, feral cats. These people, they were on the edge, and so much has changed. Now we have multi-billion-dollar publicly traded multi-state operators, companies like Green Lane that are serving the ancillary space, and everything in between. Akerna, Flow Hub, Work, BDS, Front Range Bioscience. There's just so much more. Back then, nothing.
Right.
We were launching BDS Analytics. We were talking to the founders of Front Range Biosciences to get them in the Canopy Boulder Accelerator. I was mentoring the founder of Work.
Wow.
This was we didn't have a roadmap. We didn't have a plan. We had an idea. But now the public markets, so much has changed. There's now this sort of new transparency, and it's getting better and better. New sources of capital, new sources of growth, new strategies. There's exits that are happening. People are getting paid out. Fantastic. The public markets, it started sort of, the energy was up in Canada. There was a lot of growth there in terms of capital raising. Canada is a very different place. They are very focused on how much they could raise and how much canopy, square footage they could have. And finally now they're getting to the, are they making money or not, or they're just losing money every quarter. Along the way, we had this sort of the public markets in the United States pop up. And again, like when we started, no one really thought that you could have a publicly traded company. It was very fringy. But here we are with companies like Curaleaf and Green Thumb, Cresco, Ascend, Truly. They are proving and proving to a different audience that there is just a lot of money to be made. As much as like Wall Street or the Martha's Vineyard set, they were like, oh, this is for those drug dealers and shady characters. It's real now. You just when a company is reporting $100 million sales quarter with line of sight to $1 billion in annual sales, that's going to get people's attention. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's still not enough. There's still not enough institutional capital flowing in there. I think the last report I saw, maybe the Jefferies report, they estimated there's only 4% institutional ownership of the top MSOs.
Wow.
So
that's crazy.
Without that sort of anchor capital, you're going to see some, emotional trading, some logical moves, but certainly keeps it interesting.
It definitely keeps it interesting. And I mean, in my view, the US MSOs are like the best hidden secret when it comes to like the market today, right? And
Mhm.
those that are active on Twitter within the cannabis community are very aware, specifically the MSO gang, right? We're following
Mhm.
all these large MSOs and top performing MSOs, like you talked about, the Curaleafs, True Leaf, Green Thumb,
Mhm.
and so um, what what is the reason why you think the majority of the population is not aware of these companies just yet? Is it that there's the stigma around cannabis due to the Schedule One listing? Is it that they're not uplisted within the Nasdaq and the American exchanges? Is it a combination of things? Like, what is your view?
Well, I mean, I think I think what you're trying to say is there's like kind of low trading volumes,
Low
right?
trading volume, yeah, and it's like, and it seems to be like it fluctuates, right? I mean, some of the biggest operators that we've heard, like they're putting out good numbers in their quarterly reviews and whatnot, and they're citing good numbers. Yet, even if there's good information out there, the stock price seems to be going down or staying maintaining at certain levels, not going up. So what do you
Mhm.
think that is? And I know, and I'm asking because I know that I've had Brady Cobb on that had his view on it, but I wanted to hear your take.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's going to be much smarter people to comment on the public markets than I. But one thing that I maybe have that others don't have is a longer history of tracking what's happened in those public markets in the cannabis industry. So, back when Colorado legalized, yeah, you saw a bunch of publicly traded penny stocks spike. The valuations just shot through the roof. And that was in January 1st of 2014. And then, you had uh, Canada go legalization. You see another spike, right? And then California legalizing, you see another spike. Then you see Trump elected and Jeff Sessions become the attorney general and a drop. So, then most recently Biden was elected and they flipped the Senate in February. What happened?
Boom. Yeah.
So I think it's there's sort of this classic retail momentum trade that happens. Like big news, people go in, they see them, it go up. They buy at the right time, it goes up. 70-80% they sell.
Right.
They're like, I don't know how this is going to really play out. I don't know if the time to stay in, but it's so easy to just click, 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 buy and sell that I'm gonna take my profits and go and keep an eye on it and maybe go back in later. But if you're a student of the history, you've seen it go
Right.
like this,
Right.
and it hasn't always been logical. Just because Colorado legalized didn't mean that the market, some of these companies were worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Not at all.
Right.
But they were a vehicle for people to engage in the industry. And I think every time somebody buys a stock, it works to chip away at that stigma and chip away at the beliefs that this is a real frontier market and that there's still a bunch of shady characters there. I think it's good. It's good to see that activity, even if sometimes the prices go back down.
Sure. And I totally agree. I mean, this is a long-term play, right? I mean, we're talking 5 to 10 years where you're really going to start to see some real return on investments. And that's kind of what's been echoed on this podcast for those listening is that, be patient with it. Like you said, it's going to fluctuate based on what's happening in the news or in the markets and whatnot. But just know that we're still federally illegal, right? And
Mhm.
there are talks of policy reform that's taking place. Obviously, Chuck Schumer, last month, introduced his draft bill. And so, what were your thoughts on that draft bill?
Mm. Yeah. Well, I'll start off and say that I think safe banking is the bill to pass. I think it will be a great leveler of the playing field. Senator Booker at the press conference sort of said, I'm not going to pass a safe banking standalone because that's going to be a big give to corporate weed. That couldn't be further from the truth. The
I
big
totally agree. Yeah.
the big multi-state operators, whatever you want to call big corporate weed, they already have banking. It's the small and medium-sized businesses that don't. So if you can give them access to, banking and lending and, you know, just eliminate that problem of, am I going to lose my bank account, have to go out and find my seventh bank account since I've been in the industry. You eliminate that that elevates their abilities. It
Right.
gives them firmer footing on which to grow. So I just want to say that I think safe banking is the bill to pass. Now, what was it called? I've got the copy here. Cannabis Administration and Opportunity Act. There was
COAC. Yeah. Or
CAOA. Yeah,
there you
it's
go.
like,
Okay. Yeah.
so there was actually an interesting Reddit thread on the CAOA, and I thought it was a very smart analysis. Basically, if Schumer and his, the people that were behind this bill, Booker, and I think it's Wyden or Wyden,
Yeah.
if they were able to generate more support for a bill, I think we would have had something a little bit firmer than a sort of a discussion document, right?
Right.
And because in the Democratic Party, there's a progressive wing that wants more, right? They want the taxes, they want the social equity programs. So what we got was everything in the kitchen sink in this document, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's been framed in the way it's been framed to garner feedback and reaction from Congress, from consumers, from the media, and also from industry. And so it's our job now to give feedback to our legislators so that they know whether different parts of this are good or bad. Certainly, a tax escalating to 25% is a bit of a jab, a bop right into states' noses and also the industry. So, you can't just layer on a 25% tax to the industry. That would kill it, right? So that's not, I think there's a lot of things in here that are starting points for conversation.
Right. It would encourage the legacy market to continue to thrive, in my opinion, right? I mean, because you would be dealing with that federal 25% tax, but then also you're dealing with state taxes as well, right? So, I mean, by the time you're ready to start operating, you could be looking at close to 40, 45, 50% in taxes just starting out the gate. I mean,
yeah,
that's definitely a deterrent. I would imagine.
We would say it was dead on arrival. But I applaud them for bringing it forth finally.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a key step in the journey to federal legalization. It allows us to react to something and talk about these components as individual elements. It sort of defined what could be included, and we'll see where we go. I do hope, though, that as this sits and is discussed, that they wisely take up safe banking, which has bipartisan support, and put that to a vote.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it is a discussion document. It shows effort on their part that they're thinking about it. It's top of mind. It allows us to kind of, like you said, provide feedback, which is so important right now. And to your point about safe banking, I couldn't agree more, because of course the operators are faced with, am I going to be shut down, right, every single day? And that is a challenge in itself, but also the safety factor. So my dad, I've tweeted this, he's running for mayor in the town that I grew up. And I'm bringing this up because about 2 weeks ago, he was at a city council meeting and just listening in. And the topic for the main topic was cannabis regulation and cannabis ordinance, because New Mexico is now an adult use state. And, people came up to voice their opinions that they're either happy that this passed or they're not. But, ultimately what the police chief said, which I thought was very interesting and on point, was, he said, whether we like it or not, this is here. He said, the real challenge that we're faced as a police force now is ensuring the safety of the community and the business owners that are operating these dispensaries, because it's a cash business. So, I mean, there's been history of Mexican drug cartels in the city that I grew up, and there's gang violence and whatnot. And so if you're operating a business that clearly is cash only, you're basically putting a target right on the back of those business owners. And that was one of the main things that the police chief said, and I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. I mean, the largest, most well-funded corporate cannabis companies, they have banking, no problem. It's the small to medium-sized operators, those even social equity applicants and participants in the industry, that struggle to have banking because they're little. They don't have an account at JP Morgan with $15 million in it,
Right.
and a banker who's gonna make it okay for the business to get access, to the banking system. It's a real problem. And yeah, you could be in the grocery store, behind somebody wearing a backpack that has $100,000 cash in it. Now, that's not safe. And, we don't want to put innocent people at risk for this. So it's just one of those, it's just another one of those things that needs to be fixed in the cannabis industry to get to a point where we can, realize our potential. But what I'll say is, despite all those headwinds that we have with banking access, restrictions on advertising and marketing, right? Not enough capital sources, like, the industry is still growing.
That's what's amazing, right? Like,
Mhm.
and it just shows the efficacy of the plant, and it shows the consumer, like, just thirst for the product. I can't think of a better word, but they're yearning for this product, and it basically sells itself if it's high quality. I mean, and
Yeah,
so I couldn't
it's
agree more with you. Yeah.
and people don't say this enough. It's a preferred alternative to the market standard products out there. It's safer than alcohol. It can replace a lot of pharmaceutical products. Yeah, there's a lot of great potential here that some people are aware of and others are waking up to every day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my wife is one of them. I mean, when I first started this podcast, she was very, suspicious, like, CBD, does it really work? And over time, as she has replaced melatonin with
Mm,
CBN, and
mm,
we had a
good.
conversation with someone, and we didn't realize that, melatonin's a hormone. And
Mhm.
so, when we can find better alternatives like, cannabinoid therapeutics, it's only going to be beneficial for those looking for it,
Yeah, I
and
mean,
needing it.
you're talking about a whole sector that is just being essentially discovered and commercialized. These rare cannabinoids, CBN, CBG. This is these products, these cannabinoids, with research. I mean, we have anecdotal and observational evidence, but we need to do more research to refine those formulations to target those conditions. And, again, in the supplement space, we saw the same thing, St. John's wort, echinacea for immunity. There's a lot of, like, these herbs and botanicals, which cannabis is, where you can find a way to connect those complex botanicals and all their elements to a condition and help a lot of people. It's one of the most efficacious herbs out there. So we might as well put some energy behind it.
I totally agree. Yeah. Um, we've just been doing things a certain way for such a long time that we're looking for alternatives. We're looking for something more natural that won't give us certain side effects that we've been feeling with these medications for so long.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I totally agree. I want to go back to the investment opportunities in cannabis today. One question that came up from Twitter was, what contrarian takes do you have on the cannabis investing space today?
So, I think, I don't know. I don't think about contrarian concepts, but I understand what they are. So I thought about that one last night, and perhaps maybe, you know, that, one of my contrarian takes is maybe that if you want the returns that come with a high risk emerging industry like cannabis, maybe you should explore investing in private companies. I'll give you a reason. Some of these publicly traded companies and the stocks are trading at multiples, which are maybe a little high for where they will comp to in alcohol or pharma or CPG. Maybe you won't get, if you invest in cannabis, maybe you're expecting like 10x or 100x return. But these companies are publicly traded. A lot of that's already priced in. So you may, depending on your time horizon, you may get a 2x or a 3x, which is awesome, right? But gosh, I don't know. Like when I think about investing in the cannabis industry, certainly you want to have, and this is not investment advice, but I want to have a diversified portfolio. I want to be in the public stocks, right? Touching the plan, ancillary, but I also want to have some exposure to the private companies where valuations are lower and the potential to get a 10x is more reasonable. And frankly, for me, fits that risk profile better. High risk, I want a high return.
Right. No, that makes sense. Do you see any, where do you see opportunities for venture capital in public markets?
Well, venture capital in the cannabis industry, price and timing are critical. The last sort of rounds, the last sort of vintage of venture funds in the cannabis industry were primarily focused on Series A and beyond. This was like over the last 4 years. As a result, we've seen those valuations just go up because there's not as many companies that are worthy of like a real serious Series A investment. And there's been a growing number of funds that are focused on that. So it's just classic supply and demand. Prices get boosted up.
Gotcha.
But the risk profile, the actual risk profile of a company at Series A compared to the profile of them in a bridge round before Series A, or even sometimes a Series C for a really good team, is not that different. The big difference is valuation. So, I think that there's, and this is, me drinking my own Kool-Aid. I'm completely biased because this is the strategy that, we're pursuing, is to focus on like post-seed, pre-Series A companies where valuations are much lower. Mm-hmm. Let's say they're, below $10 million. And then when you get to Series A, they're 35 to 70, right? And it's just like, it's such a big gap. That's where you can sort of, maybe if you're, the right strategy and experience and timing and the ability to write the checks and the deal flow and sort of awareness of what has the potential to work or not, you can really get in at the right time.
Sure. Well, and that's a great segue, because let's talk about Poseidon Garden Fund's strategy, right? So maybe start with y'all's portfolio and really what your focus is for the remainder of this year and beyond.
Yeah, we're focused on the cannabis industry and being opportunistic. We love, as many do, and single state operators, good teams that have a realistic view of valuation and are, going to build to sell. Those are companies that I think everybody should be looking at. In addition, there's a lot of opportunity in the ancillary products and services space. This is an area that I've been, managing funds and deploying capital in since 2015. So ancillary tech, it helps when those companies, I think one of the things that we've learned is that, because of 280E, every dollar spent by a licensed operator on something that isn't cost of goods, they don't get to deduct that from their taxes. So it actually is more, relatively more expensive for them to spend that money. So they need to make sure that every dollar spent on ancillary tech is either saving them multiple dollars or making them multiple new dollars. There's no like nice to have. There's just must have, and turbo boosts my business, right? Those are the types of businesses that I think everybody should be looking at in this industry.
Is there any trends, particularly in the ancillary technology space, that's worth calling out, like specific services that are really thriving or much needed right now?
Well, yeah, I think that there's still big problems in the industry. There's big problems with yield in cultivations. One thing that's consistent, and for those who've not been engaged in the industry and visited cultivations and heard the stories, the one thing that's consistent with almost every cultivation is IPM, pests, mold, mildew, problems. The plant has been bred for decades for high THC expression, not necessarily for resilience, especially in a large grow room, right? So these are kind of like productive plants that are weak and susceptible to, these things that can, like a powdery mildew can appear in your crop, and then because you're blowing fans and trying to keep the air moving, you're also moving everything else.
Right.
So I think there's some problems there. I think that on the dispensing side, there's been because of COVID, there's been a rapid adoption of technology for e-commerce. I think that's an interesting space, certainly, for dispensaries to realize that they need to be not just in person, but also online. And, brands are realizing that too. I think there's a lot of it, omni-channel type strategies developing.
Right. And that will set those companies up for success. Because from my understanding right now, there is like you're not allowed to ship cannabis products, even in states where it's adult use. Right. So if you have an e-commerce platform, it's all delivery. Is that correct?
Yeah. So it's going to be, there's no interstate commerce, right? Though there was an interesting article just published recently by a law professor in Vanderbilt. I think that, I don't know if you saw this, it proposed that there actually isn't any prohibition for interstate commerce. So this is, I'll try to find it and share it on Twitter so you can see it. My Twitter handle is @Patrick Ray, last name spelled R-E-A. If people want to follow up, I'll find it and post it up. But, it's again, it goes back to the belief, these assumptions that we all have that are, can be proven wrong. I mean, Jesus. Yeah.
So you're saying there's no prohibition with interstate commerce. So
what I'm saying is that a law professor has done an analysis and taken a position, making an argument that there is no prohibition for interstate commerce. It hasn't been proven. Obviously, we've learned, in the last 4 or 5 years that, our country is based on interpretations of laws as much as it's based on laws. So what you think is you can and can't do sometimes because can totally be done and will only be proven, one way or another through litigation that might take, years to go up to the Supreme Court.
Right. And, it just takes like lifting under the hood and actually doing like due diligence to see if it's interpretation or if it's actually written law, right? That we need to be abiding by.
Somebody has to test it. If things are never tested, we never know really what can and can't be done.
Right. You mentioned 280E, which is a thorn in every operator's side in the industry, right? And I didn't see any mention of the removal of 280E in the draft bill. Am I wrong about that? Did you see anything about 280E in there?
I'd have to go back through it, but I do believe there was a mention of it. It's certainly something that needs to be changed. I mean, that won't, it just won't stand. That has to be changed. And it can be. There's no reason for it, but it's generating, well, theoretically, it's generating a lot of tax revenue for the federal government. That being said, there's sort of like this insider baseball joke in the cannabis industry that the IRS is the largest lender to the cannabis industry because there's so many groups that are not paying their federal taxes. And, when you go to, as the MSOs are reporting their quarterly numbers, dig into those financial statements and find that deferred taxes line. You might be surprised.
Oh my gosh, I can't imagine. Yeah, I'm definitely going to start looking out for that now. It's crazy. Your point about the IRS or the government being the biggest lenders, that makes so much sense though. I mean, it's all under the table.
Well, no, I mean, they're just not paying their taxes. And it's like one of those things, like, of course you have to pay their taxes, they'll come after you. Well, the truth is right now, the IRS is horribly underfunded. They probably don't even, they've got some people working on this, but the IRS moves slow too. They've got to like figure out how these businesses operate, do some audits, get those right, and then keep moving on and doing it more and more and more. But right now they're just horribly underfunded and under-resourced. So there is this opportunity to, that some licensed operators are taking to not pay those taxes. And then when the IRS comes knocking, okay, go through the audit, let's figure out the number, and then let's negotiate.
And then,
so
right.
They're going to pay less than what's in that deferred taxes line. And for some of them, it's hundreds of millions of dollars.
Right. That's crazy. Wow. We live in such strange times, and especially as it relates to the cannabis industry. It's like there's like you said earlier, there's regulation here, there's less regulation here, but then it's all intertwined, and it like it adds that level of complexity where when we're ready to start talking about reform and removing the layers of the onion, it's like where do you even start, and that's what our elected officials are going to be tasked with. I mean, I get that they brought everything forward in this bill, but I think it's really going to need to be a collaborative effort with industry leaders to work with our elected officials to kind of make sure that we bring forth something that makes complete sense in every aspect, whether it's restorative justice, banking, removal of 280E, that's the ideal world. We'll probably chip away at it and not do it all at once. Like to your point, safe banking makes the most sense.
Yeah.
And going back to safe banking, one other question. I noticed that Senator Booker did he like backpedal on what he said about, like at first he was so, forward about, no, we need to have this comprehensive, we need to, have the restorative justice aspect. And he said, we won't pass safe banking without that. But then I saw him on a news segment where he was like a different tune. So is he more open to that now that the industry has spoke up?
Well, what you're seeing is political theater right in
Okay.
front of your eyes.
Yeah.
Somebody has to take an extreme position, right? And I think that's Senator Booker's role in this. And you've got to, look, the Democratic Party is not some homogenous group. I mean, there's more progressive and more conservative wings of it. So politics and is in diplomacy, you've got to like try for different groups. And if and then at some point you just gotta say, hey, we're not getting there, so what are we going to do? Do you want to not get something done, or you want to get something done? This is how it works, right? And this is how many things in life work. You don't get everything you want, but you get what you can. And hopefully it's a deal that works for everybody and it moves things forward. I think what we're going to see is a lot of classic DC negotiation, backroom deal cutting, power plays. Everybody wants, a hand in it. It's going to be a big industry. No one wants to miss this opportunity to get their pound of flesh out of it. So, my guess is that there will be a lot of things happening in the background. We'll start hearing about something moving forward, and then it'll happen really quick. That Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act of 1994 that I mentioned earlier, that passed, I believe it was on a Saturday night at like 4 a.m.
Wow. Just like that. Boom. And then the world within that industry changed overnight, right?
Yeah. Well, like you remember there was I think it was one of the medical bills in California. They published it on Friday and then voted at like 5 and then voted on it at 7 p.m. Politics is messy. Things have to get done. And, sometimes I guess the ends justify the means. It ain't easy. You got to push things through sometimes. And, politicians, they're not called like, they're people that are working policy, and then they're politicians. Right.
right. Exactly. Right. The ones that roll up their sleeves and actually critically think through, and then the others that kind of maybe just conduct more of the political theater.
They make it happen.
Yeah.
They make it happen. They're like, thank you for your input. Now I'm going to go cut a deal. Right. And, it's hard to get things done in our political climate today. So hopefully, that's why I like safe banking. It's a step in the right direction.
I totally agree. All right. So as we wrap up, Patrick, I have a kind of a negative question, but then I have a positive question. Okay. So,
all right.
What are the issues that keep you up at night? But then what are the issues that get you really excited and make you feel very opportunistic about what's to come?
Okay. So two things keep me up at night. One is the time between federal cannabis legalization and then regulation, right? And what will happen in the industry between those two periods or those two events. So we can look at hemp and CBD, right? So the Farm Bill end of 2018 legalized hemp and CBD. The FDA is still working to come. And one of the things that's happened is that the big retailers, the big CPGs, beverage companies, they've by and large stayed on the sidelines. Big PE firms, and those are needed to drive the industry forward. Whether people agree that those sort of big power brokers and consumer products are at the table or not, it's clearly without them there, we are not. With the hopes that would appear, they're not seeing the returns that or the growth that they were expecting.
Mm-hmm.
As a result, the industry's growth has slowed. Many companies have failed. It's been a bloodbath. Now, in cannabis, we have these independent state industries, right? And so I think that when we have cannabis legalization and we wait for the FDA, these businesses will continue to be able to operate without the support of institutional CPG, private equity, banking, all that stuff, right? So I feel that comforts me that we are independent and operating, but it does still concern me that we won't get the big capital, the big resources in until the FDA does act. And they will be a participant in this cannabis industry, whether people like it or not. It's just how they approach it will be, the next battle.
Mm-hmm.
Legalization is not going to be the finish line, crossing the finish line. It's going to be the start of the next race.
And you of anybody, I believe, would know that. I mean, the FDA approval, the process that goes into it, working in the natural product space for so many years.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're saying when that happens with FDA approval of various products, whether it be CBD or cannabis, that's when the institutional investors will be more likely to jump in, and that's where you start to see that kind of action take place? Or
well, it's not the approval per se, but it might be, they might require registration. FDA might require registration of certain products just so they know what's out there,
right.
Which that's fine. People shouldn't be upset about that. It exists in most other industries the FDA is involved in. And, I think that could be a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Approval would be a whole different game. I think that there's definitely a pharmaceutical cannabis or cannabinoid industry that, is developing. That we'll see further develop in the future. But my hope is that there is something more akin to, like an organic program or a, dietary supplement program where, products that are already on the market that have not had sort of problems or consumer events, adverse events reporting, that they can continue on to be sold as consumer products, not necessarily pharmaceuticals. The other thing keeps me up is valuations. There's it's been a roller coaster since 2014, capital flowing in, it's the spigot being turned off. I think that right now, there are, even in the private markets, there's a lot of unrealistic expectations on value and valuation. Fortunately, there's more and more data coming out to prove that, a company that's pre-revenue, pre-launch has some licenses shouldn't be valued at $25 to $50 million, right? It just,
right.
You got to have some stake there. Can't just be all sizzle. So that concerns me.
Okay, that's the negative. What's the positive?
Oh, the positive for
so what doesn't keep you up at night? What gets you excited when you wake up in the morning?
Man, seeing the performance of companies in the industry doing so well, it's really incredible. I mean, there are fantastic businesses being built, and not everybody's woke to it. And that's an incredible opportunity for us, for you to be investing in these companies in the public market, to maybe running a fund for accredited investors investing in private companies. I mean, the exits are happening. It's really, the industry is realizing the sort of vision that it had back when I started in looking at it in 2013, and that gets me so excited. I mean, it's exciting to see people be successful, to grow their businesses, to build their teams, to bring more talent into the industry, increase the human capital, and then get returns. This is a once in a lifetime wealth generation opportunity, and I'm excited to be, front and center.
Absolutely, as am I. Patrick
Yeah.
Ray, you're a great guy. You're a nice guy. You're super insightful, super knowledgeable. I'm so glad that the Twitter sphere was able to connect us and that we were able to make this happen. Is there anything that you want to leave the audience with before we wrap up?
Well, if you want to learn more about what we're doing at Poseidon, go to poseidon.partners. That's the URL. And if you want to get in touch with me, the best way to do that is on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active. You can find me there. Last name is spelled REA, or on Twitter. We're reconnected at Patrick Ray. Again, last name spelled REA.
Awesome. Hey man, well, let's do this again real soon as things continue to develop and evolve within the industry. And again, really, really appreciate you coming on. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, and good luck.
Of course. And thank you all for listening. Bye.